Welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success story series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what's really driving them forward. And today I'm really delighted to have with us Gordan Bateman, who's the CEO at CRSI. So Gordan, firstly, thanks so much for coming on board and welcome. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and CRSI to the audience, we'd really love to know a little bit about you and how you help people.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you for inviting me to do this. It's a pleasure to be here. So, yeah, CRSI was created because I'd seen a real challenge for people who were building and growing high growth science and technology businesses around the people side of the business. Having done that myself previously and sold a company, one of the biggest challenges I found was having the right people, the right place at the right time, engaging those people and dealing with high performers and low performers in the right manner. So every CEO I spoke to had the same problem, and I realized that there was an opportunity to help fix that. So that's essentially what CRSI do. We look at all the people elements of usually investor backed early stage and high growth businesses, and off the back of that we founded an organization called Investor Ladder, which brings together the majority of equity investors from across the UK and internationally to look at the north of England, because there is a gap in equity investors in the region. As we were saying earlier before this podcast, that there's all amazing things here in the north. All the pieces are there. They just need connecting and joining together and showcasing to the broader investment landscape. So Investor Ladder now has over 700 active investors who are interested in this region. So if any of your listeners are looking for investment, it's it's not a commercial entity, it's just an interesting network. It's invite only, and the investorladder.com platform provides that access. So just thought it's worth mentioning that whilst you were on the podcast, really.
Absolutely, and I do have 2 or 3 businesses right now that might be at least worth a conversation with. They're actively fundraising. I know one's just achieved something from a local investor, but that is a global product. So I'm sure they'd be interested in talking. And I guess from a people side, I mean, I'm speaking to businesses quite regularly, as I think you know, and everyone is talking about the challenges with recruiting, retaining, rewarding great people. And I would imagine you must be rushed off your feet right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, A, for my own organisation and still for my own organisation, and B, for clients. We've worked with over 1,000 early stage businesses. And when I say early stage companies, anything from a real startup all the way through to raising about £20 million of equity investment when we first involved. And in that 30 years, I think the last 12 months has probably been the toughest for businesses right now on the people side of their business. We all know about a shortage of talent, but there's also, and that may change in the next 12 months as the economy shifts, and we were talking about that yesterday. But engagement, expectations, I think having hybrid working is alien to a lot of founders and people. Expectations, LinkedIn's become Facebook, and people put false expectations on there. So you get people expecting unrealistic and non-sustainable things from their businesses anymore. So helping guide executives and businesses through that journey, and it genuinely is, I think, the hardest for founders right now, not just recruiting, but engagement and retention. And I think one of the things we talk about, for every £10 you spend on recruitment, if you spend £1 on engagement and retention, you'd have a much higher impact in your business. You know, if someone leaves your company, it's probably a year's salary in terms of the time that they're thinking about leaving, the time that you have to spend on recruitment, the recruitment fees if you use an external firm, the onboarding, and then the spinning up, and the impact that they've had on their colleagues. Just doing simple things and working with businesses and working with your team can make quite a significant impact, that you don't lose people, or you get people to be a bit better in productivity. So yeah, it's a bit full on at the moment. My team, we're recruiting for us, which is always tough. It's, yeah, I'd say it's the toughest that my clients saying it's the toughest they've seen in a long time.
Yes, I'm seeing the same. Keen to get your opinion. I've heard lots of people, many people talk about the difference with millennials and generation X, Y, Z. Do you have any opinion on you know, is the new younger workforce looking for different things than the previous generations, would you say?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because people say that to me, and I'm learned over time you can never stereotype anyone. I think we were all, I mean, the way I said this yesterday, I saw an event with Barclays yesterday, and the way I said this was that we were all young and naive one day, and then we just grew up. And I think that's the really interesting thing. So people go, you know, I think my parents thought I was young and stupid. Some people think millennials are now Gen Z, etc. So I think we just, as older people, have to learn how to manage differently. However, I do think different generations do have different motivations, different thoughts. I've got 2 young children myself, they're old now, miserable, they're 17 and 18, and their expectations of a working environment are very different to mine. But I think if you spend time to understand the culture, the way you manage, the way your organization works, you can bring young people into the organization who are on that bus. And there's a lot of people who aren't, and there's a lot of older people who are not on the same bus. There's, you know, it's understanding what great looks like in your organization. Obviously we were talking about this offline, but we were talking about Jake Humphrey's book about high performance, and he's got a quote in there, and high performance is doing the best you can with what you've got where you are right now. And I think that's what we all really aim to do. But I do think it's challenging. I think having people who've entered the workforce who've never worked in an office or worked in a building before because they entered the workforce, or even were educated remotely or finished their education remotely, clearly need to be managed and engaged differently. But one of the big things I do see increasingly, which I think is really encouraging for me as a human being, is I think that one of the big things that I will stereotype is younger people are more interested in purpose. So if your business is just about making money, don't even try and recruit someone who's under 25, because yes, money's important to them, but it's not the top of their agenda. You know, it's what are you actually adding value? Where are you impacting the broader picture? But yeah, it's always a management challenge, isn't it? Bringing young people in and trying to adapt, and particularly when you've got, you know, I'm 52 and I've got quite a young workforce, so just the things we talk about are different. So, but yeah, I am conscious that a lot of our clients do to get challenged with that, and because we were trained often to manage people in an office, and now having people who are not in an office, or, you know, I've managed remote teams, but they've been a team working together in a different city or a different country. Having one person who's sat at home working requires a lot of conscious thought and a lot of conscious effort on mine and my management team's basis, because management isn't a natural skill. As you know, you're a coach. You have to put conscious effort into managing people.
100%. Yeah, I think it's fascinating at the moment. I do wonder if, because we talk about personal values, and one of the things I say to most people when we talk about, you know, we're really hot on developing purpose and values in an organization, because one thing I've believed for a long time is that good relationships can come with a match of goals. We both want to achieve the same thing, but great ones come with a match of values. We both think the same things are important, and I think focusing on that, and that should lead that should lead through, you know, our recruitment policies, our marketing policies, because our clients want to know what's important to us, because they want to align with us too. I mean, there's a great stuff by Simon Sinek about, you know, about really getting and understanding what our purpose is, and having nailed that, we typically, all the best clients will turn up because, you know, they're like-minded, and I think that's true of people too.
I 100% agree. I think the challenge we see with a lot of businesses, if you look at what we do on the recruiting side, is often there's a lack of definition of what that is. So companies will go out, and particularly now as well, because there is this perception of lack of talent, means you have to rush and often hire the wrong people, not wrong functionally, but wrong, and not that they're bad people, but just that they're wrong for that business. Every business is unique, and it all comes back to, isn't it, again, all cliche phrases, but about poor preparation. If you don't understand your own journey, your own business, your own requirements, you don't take that bit at the front end. A lot of what we do on recruitment is actually at the front end definition. And then by default, you bring the right people into your business. The other thing that I think is really critical we're seeing is often, again, more so now than ever, people are afraid to deal with underperformance. So you're absolutely right when you talk about high performance, and and the value that that can add to your business, but also the damage, particularly in a smaller high growth business, that underperformance can do. And often managers don't have the toolkit to deal with underperformance and the damage that somebody's and it might not be that they're a bad person. Again, it could be just a wrong fit for your business, or they're not motivated. They're just not on the bus. And if you don't deal with that quickly, either in terms of performance management, training, re-education, or, you know, absolutely just telling the person that this isn't the right place for them, the damage they can do to the high, you know, underperformers drag down high performers. High performers rarely pull up underperformers. And I've seen this so many times where high performers have left companies because of the people that they work, not because of the business, not because the management, well, I guess it is ultimately because the management haven't dealt with it, but it's because their peer group hasn't been managed in the right way, which again, and I know you said don't bleat on about coaching, but I have no other choice to do that. But but that is where, if as a manager you are a great coach, you can work with that. The difference goes back to engagement, and retention is much cheaper than, which is odd considering a lot of our revenues are recruitment that I talk about this, but I think it's better to have a small number of awesome people in your business than a massive number of average people in your business.
Completely agree. And I mean, one of the things that I was taught to do, we do is it's amazing how often people have targets and goals that are achievement goals, which is great because that's where we want to go to. But you know, there's a simple step to put must achieve goals. So like that's where we're going. But this is the minimum level of expectation. Below that, for me, you're signing your own P45. You're choosing if you don't achieve that, and they don't have to be results outcomes. They could just be activity outcomes. You know, we expect you to do this much and just it makes management, in my opinion, much easier, Gordon, because it's a measurement. You know, management can and should be primarily around measurement, and then the coaching's around the people performance. And that's for me a bit of the difference between the two. And just making sure, you know, everyone's clear. This is the minimum level of expectation that you have, and often that doesn't happen, and consequently, somebody can even be thinking they're doing a great job, and they don't know because there isn't a measurement and a target associated with it. So,
yeah, and that's really interesting. One of the things that we've seen, going back to your comment about young people or millennials and Gen Z people, is that one of the things that we talk about when we're doing organizational reviews, we find that young people are often lost because there's an assumption by management, particularly if you've grown your own business, things that seem obvious to us as goals aren't necessarily somebody new coming into your business. So the phrase we hear a lot from younger people is, I feel lost. I don't know what is expected of me. I don't know what my goals are. They might have a KPI, but the KPI they might think is a stretch target as opposed to a minimum goal, or they might think it's the minimum goal when it's a stretch target. So clarity of communicate, all of these things are, to me, seem relatively obvious, but clarity of communication when you're bringing people in. This is, we work with clients, we build them a scorecard and say, this is what you're assessing against. And when you hire somebody, share that scorecard and say, look, you scored a 5 here. We need to get you to an 8. So A, that means you bring the right people in, and B, by default, you're in the upper quartile because by now, at that moment, you're giving someone a personal development plan. You're showing them where you expect them to develop and giving them, as you say, it might not be KPI or revenue-based goal or whatever. It might be just a personal development goal or an activity goal, but you can never hit a target if you don't know where that target is. So 100% agree, getting people, clarity is everything, isn't it, in management? If you've got clarity, then the rest of it is relatively easy to do if you've got the right people around you.
I absolutely agree. And I've learned that myself. I think management is best done when it's around measured numbers, because that way it's not about personal opinion, because personal opinion can be difficult. And that's where, if we get a people person in a management role without the numbers to actually manage people by, then it can become quite difficult, as you said before. If we, we like to, a big part of many people's personalities is pleasing others, it's very difficult to hold someone accountable. So if there isn't a number to do so, or a set of, more importantly, a set of numbers, it wouldn't often be a single one, but it just makes it more straightforward, because we all know it. I often use the phrase grown-up conversation. It's a grown-up conversation. Your target was 10, you did 12, amazing. How can we how can we get to 13 maybe one day? But your target was 10, you did 6. What's going on?
And the real added value of that, and all of these things have multiple layers, don't they, of benefit. The real added value of that is if you define that at the beginning and you use that part of your recruitment, the other benefit you get by default, without even conscious thought, is you get a diverse workforce because you're hiring against a set of fixed criteria. So it's absolutely transparent.
Yep.
You remove any unconscious or conscious bias because here's a bunch of goals that we're looking to achieve. You're looking for evidence that people can achieve those goals. And it doesn't matter what background they come from or who they are. It's whether they've got the right attitude and the mindset. And it's incredible that by where we've seen companies do that really well without conscious saying, oh, we've got to do diversity inclusion in our recruitment. They just do. Because it is that transparent, and it's an amazing. So again, it goes back to that preparation. So if you take those goals into the recruitment cycle, you just get the right people into your business.
Yeah, I find it. I mean, one of the things we focus on actually, coach, which obviously we advise people on ways to recruit. But one of the things we often say is traditional recruiting is typically selects people on experience. But the reality is we typically sack on attitude.
Yeah.
So our proposition is, why don't we start on attitude and with a base level of experience and make the recruitment process more inclusive by getting as many people together to start with, potentially in a group environment, to find the ones that are really engaged with the organisation, its values, its purpose, that really want to and are willing to operate in the way they've been asked to, rather than their way. The challenge with being over-experienced with a poor attitude is we tend to want to do it our way. And so getting that match, as I think we already talked about, that match of values and purpose is so key, because you get people going, I love this organisation, I want to work in this organisation, for this organisation, in the way it wants me to work. And it's win-win, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing.
And people just do more because they see the opportunity. They become impact players in your business because they're engaged with your business. So they don't just think, oh, this is my job. They think, oh, there's a problem over there, I'm going to see if I can fix it. And if you encourage that, then again, a number of companies we go into on the consultancy side, so CRSI is consultancy, and where we're doing an analysis of what have you got and where do you need to get to. Most organizations are overstaffed. They actually have too many people, because what they've done is they've found something that needs fixing. They haven't got the right attitudes in the business of people who just go and fix things.
Yep.
So they hire against it. And they don't need to hire against it. And then you get people frustrated because going, well, I would have liked to have done that. And there isn't that management environment that allows people to try things and make mistakes. But if you hire against purpose and attitude, people will do things outside of what they're paid to do. And again, if you read things about motivational theory, people are better in creative tasks for things they want to do, not that they're paid to do. So all around the kind of strategy and vision and changing and pivoting, or whatever phrases people use around your business, if you've engaged people around that greater purpose of your organization, the number of products and services we have as a business that are created by my staff just because they're interested in it.
Yeah.
Our entire management due diligence process that we do for VCs was created by a graduate of mine 10 years ago. She's gone on to be a partner of a VC now in Australia. But she just came up with the idea, you do a lot of this stuff, Gordon, why don't we just sell it? So we worked from 7 o'clock till 11 o'clock most nights. In fact, the reason I know it's 11 o'clock, because a number of evenings she said, if we don't hurry up, we'll miss last orders at the bar. But we didn't pay a bonus, we didn't pay her overtime to do that. She was just genuinely interested, and we have an absolute world-beating product in that market because someone aged 23, I think at the time, said, why don't we? And we did it, and it's evolved over 10 years, but that would never have come around if we didn't have that attitude of, this is the bigger purpose of the business, you're buying into that. Yes, you've got these functional things you've got to do to get there, and people will tell you, when I have our team communications days, I get quite emotional at how good my team is and how committed it is. And it's nothing to do with me, it's to do with them. And it's because they get it. They absolutely want to, our mission statement is to have an amazing place to work with amazing people who can accelerate their careers faster than any other organization. And that's what people buy. Oh, by the way, we have to do this for companies. And that just puts them on that line, and the value I get from my team is phenomenal. The commitment, it's just an amazing, why we're in an office today and why we're all back in the office, because we have flexible working policy. People can come and go when they want, I'm just looking through a glass wall in front of me, and every single desk in my office is full on a Friday. What's going? I suspect they all want to go for a drink after work, but there is an element of they're here because they want to be. You know, that's what you've got to encourage, isn't it?
100%. I love that. I think it was Brian Tracy talked about the best organizations are the ones where most people spend most of their time doing the three things they really love and they're really good at. And I think our job as leaders and managers is moving people into those roles, because, as you say, once they're in those roles, the performance and the you know what you get from them is incredible. It's like, you know, they're just they're turbocharged, and as you say, they work till 11 because they want to, not because they feel the need to.
And it can be quite scary. Sorry, Chris. It can be quite scary to have those conversations. So when people join, often they don't know. Certainly, the graduates and the interns that bring in maybe don't have a clear picture. But we ask people, where do they want to get to? And every month we sit down and say, where do you want to get to? Now, we know someone joining our organisation at 21 or as an intern at 20 is not going to retire here. So it's quite scary sometimes to sit down and someone says, I want to be a CTO or I want to be a CEO of a business. Well, you're not going to be our CTO, but by the time you leave, you will be in a position to go into the next step of that journey at ideally a much quicker time or much younger age than you would have done if you were somewhere else. But it can be, for a manager, it can be quite scary to be encouraging conversation with people that you know is going to lead to when you leave. But by having those conversations, people can start thinking about it, and then they can shape their job. I've got one guy who works for me. He wants to be the CEO of an AI business. Obviously, we don't need a CEO yet, and we don't do anything in AI apart from our clients are in AI. So he's working on all our AI clients. He's been working very closely with lots of other CEOs and CFOs, and we're teaching him things that he doesn't need to do his day job, because ultimately, so if I can get him on that journey. Not being funny, it's a great marketing story. I talk about my ex-colleague Victoria a lot, who's a partner in a VC. I can take a little piece of that, and then by default, what we then have is awesome people knocking on our door wanting to work for us, because they can see that we have the case studies of one of our consultants became our marketing manager, became a marketing director. We then spun out a company of which he became the CEO, and he's now retired. Those case studies are giving people the opportunity. And the beauty of that, I didn't have to hire a marketing manager and teach them about my culture. My marketing manager who did our website and everything else, knew everything about our culture. He just had to learn marketing, which we can teach, you know.
100%. You can teach skills, you can't teach attitude and drive. Or you can select people on it. Amazing. It just sounds a great place. I'll be looking out for a job, I think.
Well, we are recruiting. I should say this is a bit of advertising. We are recruiting right now, so if people do want to join us, they should keep in contact. No, but the joking aside, we encourage in all of our clients to be the same, because if our clients don't need our recruiting services, I think we've won. I think we've actually done a really good job. If we can encourage, and particularly now, one of the things that we were talking around over the last few days is there's a talk of a downturn in the economy, and certainly a downturn in the investment cycle. Probably right now it's happening more at the later stage investment, Series B and beyond. But what investors are saying to companies right now is you need to extend your runways. And the way to do that is to be more frugal. So maybe instead of hiring 2 salespeople, hire 1 really good salesperson that's at 150% salary of of each junior person. And you'll get more and engage that person. And so again, sounds counterintuitive to where our revenues come from, but encouraging companies to think harder about what they really need and how they can get more from less. I think we can see a lot more of that in the next 18 months as companies. We've talked to a lot of venture capital companies who are saying now they will not invest in companies for less than an 18-month runway, because when we get to the early stage market, there's still a lot of money kicking around, but in the later stage, it's the competition for that money is going to get tighter and tighter and tighter, and therefore companies have to be much better, much quicker than they were probably 18 months ago when they were looking for money. But if they are that, one of the things that we are seeing is there is still a lot of money. Talk about slowdown in investment. Well, it grew 80% last year. So a slowdown on an 80% growth is still not exactly catastrophic. It's just you've got to be better. You've got to be, and one of the biggest and easiest areas to do that is just having an awesome team that's fully engaged. Investors look at that so much now, and as the clients. So why wouldn't investors look at it? Who is actually doing this job? Who's going to grow this business? Who's going to develop it? And one of the things that I've sat in a number of investment meetings recently. One of the big things that the real high achieving VCs are asking right now is to CEOs, what are you doing to develop yourself? Not your business, yourself. How are you going to grow? Because most of us, when we set up a business, are underqualified for what we're going to build. We might be qualified when we build it, but it grows. You know, I've worked with CEOs who've stayed with businesses from 0 to 2 billion valuation. I've seen other CEOs who've the phrase, and I hate it, is the business has outgrown them. And the reason being is they've gone into what they call expert mode. They think, oh, I'm a CEO, I don't need to learn anything. And lo and behold, when they go for their Series A or Series B round of funding, the VCs go, bye, you're out of it. You know, so I've seen it more and more in the last probably 18 months of what are you doing to develop yourself? And it's an interesting angle that we're seeing a lot.
I think, yeah, absolutely bang on. I often say to people, I'll draw a growth curve, you know, and any business that increases by the same percent every year is on an exponential growth curve. And I often say, you know, from startup, you know, we go through that sort of setup and survival phase, and you know, there's a lot of fear. You know, every decision could be the last. There's so many challenges going on, but we have to change our mindset once we start to get some momentum. We do need to start developing the investment mindset of, you know, probably investment to grow. But I often say you can get to a certain point, and this would be typically sub $1 million turnover. It really depends on the number of people, really. But you can get to a certain level with a few good people in sheer blood and guts. Just work bloody hard. You know, everybody works bloody hard, do what they're good at. You can get to a point. But once we're maxed out on two key resources, one starts with time. So if you've given it everything, if there's no more to give, you can't go any further. That's literally is the limit, because the real limit is mindset and knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I often say to people, look, if you don't change how you think fundamentally, then the business is initially will start to plateau. And unfortunately, as Gerber talks about, if a business is like a tree, it's either growing or dying. So plateau isn't really a place that you can exist. It will typically decline. And I unfortunately, I mean, I see people in the same way that they choose not to open their minds and change. And you know, only a few of them survive any length of time, because you can't give it everything forever. I managed to do 3 years of 100-hour weeks and until I blew a major fuse, and it just doesn't work like that. And it's about knowing how to do things differently. And if we don't, then yeah, we become the limit to our businesses, I think.
And I think that's the thing, you know, again, the thing we talk about is capacity analysis. Is what is your limit? When's your bucket full? And your bucket is probably different to someone else's bucket in your team. Yep. And so knowing when that is, that helps you then think, right, now is the time to recruit somebody into an area where I'm not particularly good, or I need support, etc. But again, sometimes we get lost in the moment and we just think, and again, I see this with often first-time CEOs or first-time founders, who think they have to do everything. And from my mind, what I learned in my first business I did as a founder was that you, the quicker you can delegate to really amazing people, the better. And so it's knowing where that capacity is. And I was talking to a CEO the other day, and he said, how can we as a business do more without hiring people? And I just said, well, just get better at what you do. You know, and then you can analyze how you're spending your time and get rid of the stuff that's not high value, because they didn't have the money to recruit any more people, but they need to grow. So just get better at what you do. And I do sometimes say, when I start some of the consulting assignments we do, I do say sometimes I feel like I've got a degree in stating the obvious. You know, it is, but it's not. If you're in the moment and you've got client pressures and financial pressures and business pressures and everything else coming, you sometimes forget about yourself. It's the first thing that gets cut in any big organization is the training budget. It's often the first thing as individuals we do. We'll work harder rather than lift ourselves out of it and think, actually, let's stop, let's analyze what we've got, analyze what we can do better, analyze where we need to learn, and is that And part of the work we do at the setup of any recruiting exercise is it really a recruitment exercise, or is it a training and development exercise? And I would say a third of people we talk to think they need to recruit actually just need to learn. Probably about 30%, 30% of requirements that we are asked to fulfill when we get into the business are actually not recruitment requirements, they're training and development requirements. And again, it all sounds counterintuitive that you get a firm whose significant amount of their revenues come from recruiting, because that's where people have a budget, going and telling you don't need to recruit, but actually thinking about it first. Do I act? Because you can't recruit to solve a tactical problem. By the time you've identified what you need, gone out to market and recruited that person, onboarded them and got them up to speed, that problem's been fixed.
Yep.
So you've got to be recruiting 6 months out. You've got to be thinking, what do I need in 6 months? And then is it actually a strategic need, or is it a tactical need? And can someone in my organization, is this actually career development opportunity for someone who's in the business? As I say, we learned that firsthand with marketing. We were going to go out and hire a marketing manager. I realized that one of my consultants loved photography, and marketeers will kill me for saying that's for marketing, but he just had this passion for, and he used to recruit in the marketing industry. And I said, would you be interested in learning this? Bit my hand off, absolutely bit my hand off. Genuinely, all things I could never have taught an external hire in months, he learned in minutes. He then learned about marketing, and as I say, the rest was history. And an awesome guy, amazing guy. And we'd have gone out and spent money on it, because we do use external recruiters for recruiting for ourselves sometimes, because they're not the skills that we recruit for our clients. We'd have spent recruitment fees, we've spent training fees by investing in one individual. And then the other thing that it did, again, I always talk about these different layers of benefit, but the other thing it did was everyone else kind of lifted their head and went, what do I actually want to do in this business? And just magical new things happened. We've got an HR consultancy business now because somebody saw that journey happen with one of their colleagues and said, can we actually take what we do internally external? And now we manage, like as an outsourced service for quite a lot of our clients, HR as a service. And again, it was because people saw there was different opportunities within the business that they could do. And if we encourage people to do, business owners and CEOs and executive teams to do more of that, the magic just happens. The magic comes out of the chaos, if you like, as long as you're keeping right back at the beginning of talking about the targets and the goals. As long as you keep your vision, your goals in mind, and don't go off doing one of the things I get from my mentor. One of my mentors is, I think his favorite phrase is "Don't be so bloody stupid," and that's when I come out with these really wacky ideas that are not on plan, and they go, "No," and I need that as well. Someone to go, "Gordon, stay on plan. This is the mind." But you have to have that creativity, that controlled creativity, controlled chaos within the business. And sometimes it absolutely doesn't work. We've had other examples where people have come up with ideas and we've tried it and we've looked at it, and then the market isn't ready for what we're doing, or there's competition out there who do it, and therefore we just retract in. But as my old running coach used to say, you either win or you learn. And there's no loss. And we have that drilled into the guys here. It's one of our core values of the business. You win or you learn. And again, just the non-financial benefit we get from that in the team is something that you just can't buy.
100%. It's funny you say where we use that phrase a lot ourselves. We were slightly, we're not modified, but we do a lot of work with Frank Dick, who's a athletic, very high performance athletics coach for many years. And one thing I heard him say recently, and that really made me think. He said it's really, you get a lot of learning from the failures, from the things that go wrong. So the win or learn idea, that learn is great. But what he said is, but we also need to analyze the win, because what he said was, if you don't know why you won, then it's luck. And that's really hit me, because it's like, great. I mean, I love to celebrate wins, but we do a little bit of work, but it's okay, what was that made it win? And it was just a really fascinating thing that I love. One of my favorite quotes is a Japanese one that says fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I think I'm at least on 13 on that one, so I'm cool with that. But but I'm always there, very keen on analysing it, accepting that failures happen, but what can I draw from it? But I probably don't spend as much time analysing the wins to make sure it isn't luck, or certainly isn't luck that we do it again. one thing
I'm going to steal that. You know, again, you learn from everything, don't you? I've got that from amongst other things, but I've got that from today. So I'm going into a meeting planning our Investor Lab year calendar in a moment, and I'm going to use that because I think you're absolutely right. I think as managers and maybe culturally we are taught to look at the failures better, and I think we often do forget actually why did that work. I know I'm certainly guilty of that, and so thank you for that. I'm actually going to use that word for word. Probably anyone who's listening to this who knows me will get bored of me saying it now, so thank you for that takeaway from this morning.
You're very welcome. You can, but obviously please credit Frank, because it really made me think. But yeah, we must close shortly. But one thing I was going to ask you, I don't know if you've read, there's a really interesting book I've not read for a long time, so I'm going to it's a book called The Big Five for Life by Robert Strelecki, and it's primarily a book about setting goals for ourselves. The big five being, you know, if you go on safari, you want to see a lion, a giraffe, a zebra, a rhinoceros. But it's what are your big five? You know, what is big five? But it's a story, a guy talking about his manager and how amazing this manager was, and how the manager was all about understanding him and what he really wanted from life, and helped to create that environment. And you know, the guy turned out to be he was a tech guy that loved his traveling and his experiences. So the manager had made a job where he worked 6 months a year, so this guy could, and you know, that's not that there's so much more in the book, but it's just that the way we were talking, it really brought that to mind, because yeah, I think the more we can empower people and engage people in what they're really good at and what they love, then as you said, it may be we don't need to recruit that much more. We just need to get more out of the people that, or help those people we've got move into environments where they do more and love it, which is fantastic.
And it is, you know, going back to your question about millennials and Gen Z people, it's the single motivator. I did a piece of work with a major telecoms organization, and they said, well, we have a real problem. We've just given everyone a pay rise and we still score low on engagement. And it's like, maybe pay rise isn't their motivator. And they ran a survey, and it was really interesting that the top 5 things that the individuals, and this was at, I think it was under 35, the top 5 things that were motivating to those people were personal development, career development. This was pre-COVID, so there was flexibility, and long-term growth. There was nothing around. Oh, and the 5th one was the people they work with, the actual their peer group. And then there was this massive drop, and they were all relatively close. And then there was a massive drop, and then it was long-term incentive plans, and then it was salary. Yeah, it was a massive difference. And then the telecoms company were like, "Oh wow, this is a difference of." That we hadn't really thought of. And so by investing in that long-term career development, their long-term and short-term personal and career development made a significant difference and a big uplift. And of course, the budget for that was much smaller than it was that it was spending on recruitment. Shifting that emphasis over in a slightly different way but again, it all goes back to the setup. It's all about a definition. The more time you spend in that definition phase, again, in every aspect of life, isn't it? The more you spend in planning, the less time you spend in doing. So
completely agree. Absolutely. Gordan, I could go on for hours talking with you about these things. I really want to thank you for your time, because I know you're very busy. And perhaps what we could perhaps plan to do is sort of continue this at a later date. But right now, I really thank you for your time. It's some really fascinating insights, and I think a lot of people right now that I'm speaking to, you know, would benefit from knowing a little bit more about what you do and how you do it, because you know, I'm seeing people are struggling with the whole, you know, team building and team retention strategies right now. So thank you so much. What's the best way to contact you guys?
So our website is crsi.team. Clever marketing stint that was maybe too clever, and investorladder.com. But my business development manager is a lady called Laura Corrigan, so it's laura.corrigan@crsi.team. But there's again, maybe shameless plugs, later in the year in Leeds Dock, there is a new innovation centre being created called Exchange. It's being built as we speak, and we'll be doing lots of workshops and lots of seminars. We're part of a number of accelerators. So you may see us around. So look at what we're talking around in LinkedIn, both on InvestLadder and CRSI. And there's things that we do formally and things that we do informally. So, but they're probably the best channels.
Thank you. And again, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Oh, thank you very much, Chris. Pleasure to speak to you.